Hello, my name is Aaron Noy. This is my microbiology project. It's on Clostridium difficile. So we'll go ahead and get started with the slideshow. Clostridium difficile's taxonomy goes as follows. Its domain is bacteria. Its phylum is Firmicutes. Its class is Clostridia. Its order is Clostridius. Its family is Peptostreptococcinea. Its genus is Clostridioides, and its species is C. difficile. Concerning its morphology, Clostridium difficile is kind of a long word, so henceforth I want to refer to it as C. diff. It's gram-positive, it's anaerobic, meaning it lives in the absence of air or oxygen, and it's spore-forming. Under magnification of a microscope, it is rod-shaped, or you can refer to it as a bacillus shape, and they are usually formed in chain clusters together, more like chains, and in this way it is known as a strepto shape. So together we can refer to it as a streptobacillus type organism. So regarding its habitat, C. diff has two states: a vegetative state, which is an active state. In this state, it can survive outside of the host for about 24 hours. In its spore state, it can survive up to 2 years in an aerobic environment, such as objects, soil, and things like that, anywhere out of the body. But mainly for it to survive, for it to live and to thrive, C. diff lives mainly in the human intestinal tract. It's also opportunistic. And what this means is that it doesn't do well in competition against other intestinal fauna and flora in this case. When they compete for resources such as food and living space and things like that, it doesn't usually do too well. So where it does flourish, though, is when the natural organisms in the human gut have been reduced, whether naturally, due to old age, or the introduction of an artificial environment, such as the introduction of antibiotics or immunosuppressant drugs, where the natural fauna has been reduced, and this is when C. diff can thrive and proliferate well and thrive. This is when it causes a problem. So what diseases does it cause? Thriving colonies of Clostridium difficile cause an infection known as an infection of C. diff. This in turn causes enteritis or colitis, which is the inflammation of the colon. And in rare cases, you have toxic megacolon. This is where a colon can't really fully empty itself, and it just bloats up, and then it ends up rupturing. This is a very rare case, and this is one of those things that can happen if it's unchecked. So its manifestations, it manifests in signs and symptoms such as loose, watery diarrhea, and you're thinking in the time frame of usually within 24 hours, so equal to 3 times a day or more. Other presentations could be weight loss, dehydration, intestinal disturbances. It also is known to have a very strong offensive odor in human fecal matter. Also, there's fever and altered mental status. This is when someone's mental state is different from their baseline. So they're different somehow, usually in that respect. So what are the causative factors determining virulence? There are two. There's this thing called fecal microbiome. Now this is taking in all the natural organisms that reside in the human intestine. Multiple bacteria are naturally present in our large intestines. There's over 200, I think, individual colonies. This serves as a hostile environment for C. diff, so it doesn't really compete well, like we said earlier. The second factor determining its virulence is our immune response. A weakened immune system, or a suppressed immune system, someone who has a underlying condition, AIDS, cancer, things like that, someone that's immunocompromised in some way. Then there's also people that are immunosuppressed when they're taking medications that cause suppression of their immune system. These two factors really can secure when C. diff will take a hold and cause enteritis and colonitis and things like that. So without these two factors, it can pretty much take over and run amok. So how does it cause disease, actually, right? So this is caused by a release of two proteins from C. diff. These are exotoxins, which are A and B. Exotoxin A and B disrupt the cytoskeletal structures of our cells surrounding the cell wall, and this causes lysis and ultimately cell death. Okay, this causes inflammation, and then this causes what's known as CDAD, or Clostridium difficile associated diarrhea. This is usually the first thing that we notice, that people will notice. The first symptoms is what we're referring to earlier, is the diarrhea, the loose and watery stools, and this happens multiple times during the day. This will draw people's attention, and when usually healthcare professionals will go ahead and run some tests and see if there's anything wrong. So as I mentioned earlier, these toxins, they kill the lining of the intestine in that way. They cause lysis. And in this way, the cells will eventually cause blotches in the intestinal wall. And these are known as pseudomembranous colitis. They appear as membranes in the intestine, but not. And with an endoscopy, a doctor can actually look into it and see it, and they look like blotches. And this is what can cause a lot of problems in a lot of people, the people that are afflicted with this affliction, for lack of a better term. So what are our risk groups? Our risk groups are usually the regularly known risk group people. So it's the elderly, anyone that's greater than 65 years of age. And why is this? This is usually because of their weakened immune system, or slower immune response time because of their advanced age. Also, they're prone to more bouts of antibiotic therapy because they're older. They require a little bit more maintenance health-wise. So there's more visits to the doctor, there's more medications that are being taken and things like that. They're more prone to hospitalization. Then we have our immunocompromised people, or people with underlying medical conditions. These people are unable to have an appropriate immune response. And so they're prone to, once again, more antibiotics, and also prone to hospitalizations, which exposes them to nosocomial infections, which are infections that are acquired in the hospital. And then we have our final risk group, which are infants. And these are, obviously, they don't have the proper fecal microbiomes, which we were talking about earlier. They don't have the proper fauna, the gut fauna that keeps us healthy, and that are normally proliferant and prevalent in our intestines, that usually will overpower and introduce C. diff if it were to be introduced to this person. So these are the risk groups. We have the elderly, we have the immunocompromised, and we have infants. Moving on, we have treatments. So strangely enough, the introduction of antibiotics, which wipes us of our good bacteria, is also the therapy that we use to treat people with C. diff. So the most commonly used are vancomycin and flagyl. Now these have varying degrees of success, obviously based on the person that is being afflicted, how severe the case is. So there's varying effectiveness. And also these infections can reoccur up to about 20% of people or so. And then we have another way of treating, which is called fecal transplant surgery. And according to the CDC, this has a 90% recovery rate. So generally what happens, if this person takes this run of antibiotics, they get a reoccurrence. Generally, they're going to want, ultimately, will eventually happen. They'll eventually get the fecal transplant surgery, and we'll go from there if they have exhausted every other avenue concerning the antibiotics. And so as far as vaccinations go, there's currently no vaccinations for C. diff, although several companies around the world are doing quite a bit of research into it, and I think some of them are in their testing phases. So that'll do it for my presentation on C. diff, Clostridium difficile. Thank you very much.